You show up, you do the work, you set the alarm, punch the clock, answer the calls. You're not lazy, you're not lacking ambition. You've read the books, you've listened to the podcasts, you've even written out your goals a few times. And yet, if you're being honest, life still feels stuck. The results don't match the effort. The dream feels distant, even though the days feel full. You've got the actions, you've got the activity, but something underneath it all is off. And I'm here to tell you today, it might not be your work ethic that's the problem. It might be your attitude. Let's think about this. Have you ever driven a car with the handbrake halfway up? You press the gas, you hear the engine, you feel the movement, but it's sluggish, strained, frustrating. You're trying to go forward, but something unseen is dragging you down. That's what happens when your attitude is misaligned. It's like pressing through life with the handbrake on. You get motion without momentum, effort without progress, and eventually you start to feel it. Not just in your results, but in your spirit. You start wondering, what's wrong with me? Why isn't it working? But the problem isn't you, it's how you're carrying you. See, we've been told for years that success is about hustle, grind, effort. And don't get me wrong, I believe in work, I believe in discipline, but there's something even more foundational than what you do with your hands. And that's what you carry in your heart. Because you can't build a dream with a bitter spirit. You can't create momentum with a defeated tone. You can't speak life while thinking death. And you can't attract opportunity while repelling it with complaint, sarcasm, resentment, or low expectations. Let's be very clear. Your attitude is not a side issue. It's not decoration. It's not personality. Your attitude is the architecture of your future. It's the filter that shapes your decisions, your tone, your relationships, your influence, your energy. And if your attitude is off, no matter how hard you work, your outcomes will eventually collapse under the weight of your own mindset. That's why this isn't a pep talk. This is a warning. Because I've seen too many people with talent, ideas, even opportunity, ruin it all with a poor attitude. They were gifted, but ungrateful, smart, but sour, active, but arrogant. And it cost them. It always does. Here's the philosophical tension. Right actions with the wrong attitude cancel each other out. You can say the right things, but if your tone is poisoned, it won't land. You can try the right habits, but if your heart is cynical, they won't stick. You can chase the right vision, but if your attitude is casual, the dream will rot. Because what you carry inside will eventually sabotage what you're building outside. That's not theory, that's reality, and it's time to face it. Not with shame, but with clarity. So here's what I want you to hear at the start. If your life feels stuck and your effort isn't matching your results, and your motivation is draining faster than it should be, it may not be your circumstances. It may be your posture, your perspective, your tone, the way you're carrying your days. And the good news is this: if the problem is internal, then so is the solution. You don't have to wait for life to get easier. You don't have to beg for the world to treat you better. You don't have to wait for permission. You just have to adjust the lens. Because sometimes the dream is right in front of you, but the window is too fogged to see it. Your dream life is not dead. It's suffocating under a poor attitude. And the moment you shift that, deliberately, daily, decisively, your energy returns. Your clarity sharpens. Your opportunities respond. Because the world reacts to the person you bring to it. And when you bring a posture of faith, responsibility, strength, and possibility, you stop surviving your life and you start shaping it. So before we go any further, ask yourself, have I been working with the handbrake on? And if the answer is yes, then let today be the day you reach down and release it. Now that we've uncovered the emotional weight of that misalignment, the sensation of working hard but still feeling stuck, let's name the silent current underneath it. Because most people think drift is about action. They think it's about laziness, procrastination, inconsistency. But the most dangerous kind of drift doesn't start in your calendar. It starts in your attitude. It starts with a small shift in how you think, how you speak, how you interpret your own efforts and outcomes. Drift begins not in what you do, but in how you carry what you do. And here's the dangerous part. Attitude drift doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive like a storm. It creeps in like a fog, quiet, invisible, persistent. It shows up when you stop believing your effort matters, when you stop expecting things to change, when you start using sarcasm instead of faith, when you let cynicism become your tone, when why try replaces what's possible. you haven't quit, but something inside you has. The belief that what you do can still move the needle has quietly leaked out of your system. And when that happens, even your best habits lose their power because the posture you do them with is poisoned. Let me give you a few signs that attitude drift has taken hold. You find yourself expecting disappointment. You brace for the worst instead of planning for the best. You catch yourself saying things like, "It always happens to me," or "What's the point?" You find it hard to be happy for other people's progress. You hear wisdom, but it bounces off your heart instead of sinking in. You've become more familiar with blame than with ownership. You respond to correction with defensiveness, not curiosity. And perhaps most of all, you stop dreaming before you even start working. Why is this such a problem? Because attitude isn't just how you feel, it's how you frame your entire life. A poor attitude doesn't just infect your mood, it infects your vision. You start seeing opportunities as threats, feedback as criticism, discipline as punishment. And when that framing becomes your default setting, every effort feels heavier. Every challenge feels personal. Every delay feels final. You don't stop moving. You just stop believing the movement matters. That's drift, not of the body, but of the spirit. And here's the hard truth. Drift of attitude often feels justified because life has been hard. You've been hurt, you've been overlooked, you've tried things that didn't work. And over time, if you're not careful, pain gives birth to protection, and protection becomes bitterness. And bitterness feels wise. It feels safe. But all it does is freeze your future. It builds walls around your potential. And soon, you're not just drifting, you're detached, going through the motions, but with a heart that's already given up. This is why I say that attitude is a moral responsibility. Not because your life should be easy, but because your response to difficulty shapes everything that comes next. Your internal stewardship, how you handle your thoughts, your beliefs, your interpretations, is not just a mindset issue, it's a character issue. Because how you choose to think about your life is the truest test of whether you're ready to handle more. If you want more opportunity, more responsibility, more influence, the question isn't just, what are you doing? It's, how are you thinking? What's the lens you're looking through? Let me put it like this. Your dream life is not waiting on new information. It's waiting on a new interpretation, a new attitude, one that takes the same circumstances and sees different possibilities, one that looks at hardship and sees growth, one that looks at delay and sees development, one that looks at feedback and sees refinement. That's the kind of attitude that stops drift in its tracks. That's the kind of posture that pulls you out of the fog and back into purpose. And maybe you've been drifting. Maybe you've been doing the work, but losing the wonder. Maybe your attitude has been sliding while your hands have stayed busy. If that's you, this isn't the end. This is the alarm. This is the moment you stop letting sarcasm steal your sincerity. This is where you stop waiting for life to lift you and start lifting your life from within. Because once your attitude is right, really right, everything else begins to realign around it. Remember, a negative attitude is like a flat tire. You can keep the car clean, you can polish the mirrors, you can fill the tank, but until you fix the tire, you're not going anywhere. And until you fix your attitude, the dream isn't going to move. Not because it's impossible, but because you're pulling against it from the inside. Fix the tire, adjust the posture, realign the spirit, and watch what happens when your effort finally has the attitude to match. There's a subtle exchange that begins to happen inside the heart long before we see the effects on the outside. A dangerous trade, quiet, unnoticed, and deeply corrosive. It's when gratitude, the humble recognition of what we've been entrusted with, is silently traded for entitlement, the belief that life owes us more. And let me tell you something plainly. That trade is what begins to rot the roots of your dream life. Because you can't build anything stable when the foundation is, I deserve more than this. That's not strength. That's decay. That's the beginning of drift, wrapped in the disguise of ambition. Entitlement whispers things like, this isn't fair. I should be further along. Why do they get what I don't? And it always shows up when progress feels slow, when the work gets mundane, when the applause is missing. But what entitlement refuses to see, what it can't see, is that growth always starts underground. Gratitude says, even though no one sees it yet, I'm becoming something. Entitlement says, if no one notices, it must not matter. Gratitude leans in. Entitlement checks out. And the longer you let that trade stand unchallenged, the more you begin to sit on a throne made of excuses, comfortable, justified, and going nowhere. Let me paint the picture. Imagine a king sitting on a throne that's rotting from the inside. He still wears the crown. He still gives orders. But the structure beneath him is weakening by the day. That's what entitlement does. It props you up with the illusion of authority while slowly undermining your ability to move. And here's the irony. It feels like power, but it removes your power. Because the moment you believe you're owed something, you stop building. You wait, you complain, you compare, you rehearse your disappointments instead of reinforcing your disciplines. And the dream begins to suffocate beneath the weight of what you think should have already happened. Now, don't confuse this with ambition. Wanting more is good. Reaching higher is necessary. But demanding more from life before you've demanded more from yourself, that's where the rot begins. That's where you move from building to brooding. And that posture doesn't produce greatness. It produces frustration, it breeds resentment, and worst of all, it keeps your focus on what's missing instead of what's possible. That's why this attitude must be addressed, not lightly but decisively, because you can't afford to sit one more day on a throne of excuses. The shift is simple but powerful. You move from I'm owed to I'm assigned. That means the job you have now, you've been assigned to it, not forever, but for development. That means the pressure you're under. It's not punishment, it's preparation. That means the opportunities you haven't gotten yet, maybe they're waiting on you to prove you can handle what you've already been given. That's gratitude. That's perspective. That's stewardship. And stewardship is the breeding ground for promotion, not just in work, but in life, in influence, in growth. Gratitude says, what I have matters. Gratitude says, this season counts. Gratitude says, there is something here for me to learn, build, grow, and refine. And when you start treating the present like an assignment instead of a setback, everything changes. You stop resenting where you are. You start rising inside it. You stop chasing what you think you deserve, and you start becoming someone who can carry more, because your posture is no longer entitled, it's engaged. So ask yourself, have I been sitting on that throne? Have I been measuring my life by what I haven't received instead of what I've been called to build right now? And if so, today's the day to stand up, to step down from that false royalty and step into the mindset of a builder. One who says, if this is my assignment, then I'm going to own it. If this is the level I'm at, I'm going to master it. Because the faster I steward this season with gratitude, the faster I become the kind of person who deserves the next one. End the trade, burn the throne, pick up the tools of responsibility, and build, because what you're really owed is opportunity. And that only comes to those who honor what they've already been given. There's another trade that steals momentum, and this one is even more socially acceptable: complaint over correction. And if you're not careful, it will disguise itself as wisdom, as venting, as just being real. But let me tell you what's really happening. Every time you choose complaint over correction, you're trading forward motion for a false sense of control. You're choosing to talk about the problem instead of owning your role in it. And you can't build anything from that place. You can only rehearse what's wrong while reinforcing your stuckness. Now, don't get me wrong. Awareness matters. Reflection is vital. But there's a line where healthy analysis turns into spiritual paralysis, where you say the same things about the same problems to the same people and nothing changes. Not because the problem's unsolvable, but because you've grown more addicted to the sound of the problem than the discomfort of the solution. And here's what happens. Complaint becomes your identity. You become known for what frustrates you, not what you're building. You become more articulate about what's wrong than you are about what you're responsible for. And that attitude will slowly drain the life out of your dream. I want you to imagine someone standing on a ship shouting at the wind, "Why is this happening again? Why doesn't it blow the way I want? Why can't it be like it was last week?" They're passionate, they're loud, but they're still drifting, because yelling at the wind does nothing. What moves the ship is the one who adjusts the sails. That's correction. That's responsibility. That's the difference between letting your circumstances define you and letting your choices redefine your future. And that's why I say the problem is never just the problem. The real problem is how you talk about the problem, because that reveals your posture. That reveals whether you're still open to change or already resigned to complaint. And if you're not careful, complaint becomes a comfort. It lets you off the hook. It gives you something to say when progress is slow. But here's the hard truth. Complaining about your limitations doesn't remove them. It cements them. It trains your mind to look for reasons instead of solutions. It gives your ego relief, but steals your effectiveness. And let me say something the world won't. Your feelings about the problem are valid, but they're not the final authority. At some point, maturity says, I'm allowed to feel this, but I still have to fix this. That's correction. That's inner leadership. That's choosing discipline over drama, direction over delay. Because nobody else is going to turn the sails for you. Nobody else is going to stop the drift. And the sooner you stop pointing at the wind and start adjusting your approach, the sooner your life starts moving again. Not because the storm ended, but because you changed your posture inside it. So ask yourself, what do I talk about more? What's broken or what I'm building? What gets more airtime in my day? Complaints or corrections? Do I rehearse frustration or apply feedback? Do I rehash what they did or do I reinforce what I can do next? Because if you'll be honest about those answers, you'll find the real reason your dream life feels delayed. Not because the opportunity isn't out there, but because the builder has been too busy describing the storm to do anything about it. The change begins now. From this day forward, when something frustrates you, fix something. Don't spiral, adjust, don't vent, correct. Don't shout at the wind, trim the sail, because complaint might feel good for a moment, but correction gets you moving again. And you weren't meant to stay stuck. You were meant to build, but you can't build with your mouth full of excuses. Empty it, clear it, and pick up the tools again. So now that we've peeled back the layers of what drifts and decays, entitlement, complaint, blame, passivity, it's time to draw the contrast. Let's step out of the fog and into clarity. Let's talk about what discipline actually looks like when it comes to your attitude. Because attitude isn't just a feeling you stumble into. It's not some mystical personality trait reserved for the optimistic or the naturally enthusiastic. It's a decision, and like every other form of discipline, it must be built, rehearsed, protected, practiced, sharpened. It must be chosen before it is felt. And if you don't choose it daily, the world will choose it for you. And the world rarely chooses wisely. Discipline and attitude starts with this foundational truth. You are not your mood. And the sooner you learn that, the stronger your days become. Because moods are unpredictable. Circumstances shift. People disappoint. Emotions rise and fall. But attitude, the posture you take toward life, work, people, responsibility, growth, that's within your control. That's something you get to steer. And it's not about being fake. It's about being firm. It's about anchoring yourself in principles so that when the waves hit, you don't tip into sarcasm, resentment, apathy, or despair. You hold your center. You lead yourself through the moment. Let me give you a picture. Discipline and attitude is like turning the sail instead of cursing the storm. You don't control the wind, but you do control the response. And the people who move forward in life, who rise, who grow, who build anything meaningful, aren't the ones with perfect conditions. They're the ones who make internal adjustments until their direction changes. They learn how to see opportunity in difficulty. They train themselves to spot growth in the middle of disappointment. They don't deny the storm. They decide inside it. And that's discipline. That's maturity. That's strength. And here's the truth most people don't realize. You're not tired because you're doing too much. You're tired because you're carrying it with the wrong attitude. Bitterness is heavy. Complaining is exhausting. Sarcasm drains the soul. And when you wake up every day and walk through life with that tone, it's no wonder you feel stuck. It's no wonder your effort doesn't multiply. It's no wonder your discipline doesn't stick. Because even the best habits break down when the attitude behind them is rotten. And no matter how hard you try, you can't outperform your internal posture. So what does discipline and attitude look like practically? It looks like waking up and choosing gratitude before evidence. It looks like saying, this might be hard, but it's building me. It looks like catching the complaining voice in your head and replacing it with curiosity. What is this moment trying to teach me? It looks like treating every day like training, not just for skill, but for spirit. It looks like protecting your tone, your language, your energy, because those are the tools you use to frame your future. It also looks like patience, not passivity, but patience with process. Builders know that real change doesn't shout. It compounds. And that means learning how to hold the right attitude even when results are slow, especially when they're slow, because it's in those quiet, discouraging seasons that your character is forged. It's when nothing seems to be working that you discover whether your attitude was rooted in circumstance or in principle. Discipline says, I show up anyway. Discipline says, I speak life when I feel drained. Discipline says, I keep my head high, not because it's easy, but because I refuse to bend to negativity. And here's the deeper truth. When you carry that kind of attitude, when you build it, protect it, and return to it daily, you don't just change your life. You attract better things into it. People respond to a disciplined spirit. Opportunity responds to a grounded presence. Doors open for the one who walks in with a posture that says, I'm not perfect, but I'm present. I'm ready. I'm rooted. I'm building from the inside out. And that posture, that steady internal conviction, that's what separates the ones who visit the dream from the ones who build it. So if you've been chasing the right goals with the wrong mindset, if you've been trying to construct a future on the foundation of a fragile attitude, let today be the turning point. Choose discipline, not just in what you do, but in how you carry what you do. Practice gratitude, practice posture, practice patience, practice belief, not once, every day. Because when you train your attitude, you don't just change your day, you change your trajectory. And that's how you begin again, not with louder effort, but with better alignment. The greatest misunderstanding people carry about the dream life is this idea that if they just push hard enough, grind long enough, outwork everyone, stay louder, show up bigger, then somehow the universe will bend to their effort and deliver what they've been chasing. But let me tell you something foundational, something that will save you years of frustration and emotional exhaustion. Your dream life does not respond to force. It responds to alignment. It responds to the invisible structure within you, the character, the clarity, the consistency, the attitude that shapes everything you build around you. And until you get that aligned, it doesn't matter how hard you push, because you're still pushing in the wrong direction. See, most people don't fail from a lack of effort. They fail from a lack of internal coherence. They say one thing, but believe another. They declare goals they haven't prepared to carry. They chase success while carrying resentment. They try to attract opportunity with a complaining spirit. They want visibility before they've earned vision. And they're confused when it all falls apart. But you can't fake foundation. You can't decorate a life that's built out of sync with itself. That's why I say, before the dream becomes visible, the dream must become viable. And that viability is born in attitude. Let's break it down. The dream life is not just what you get. It's what you become strong enough to sustain. And that means you need more than ambition. You need architecture. You need to align your beliefs with your behavior, your emotions with your ethics, your expectations with your effort. Because the dream life is not given to the most talented. It's revealed to the most aligned. When your thoughts, words, tone, and actions begin to work in harmony, life responds. Opportunities show up, not because you're louder, but because you're clearer. People trust you, not because you demand respect, but because your spirit is consistent. Results flow, not because you're lucky, but because your roots are deep. Let me say this plainly. You can't bulldoze your way to a dream if your spirit is bitter. You can't manipulate your way to peace if your inner life is chaotic. You can't hustle your way to rest if your mindset is out of order. Because all effort, no matter how noble, eventually bends under the weight of unresolved attitude. That's why so many driven people burn out, not because they don't care, but because they never aligned. They never paused long enough to deal with the inner contradictions. They never disciplined their lens, and so everything they built, even when successful, felt empty. Here's the metaphor. The dream doesn't bloom in toxic soil. No matter how good the seed is, your business idea, your goal, your plan, if the soil is full of complaint, blame, fear, or resentment, the seed will choke. The roots won't form. You'll see effort without harvest. And eventually, you'll start to think something's wrong with the seed, when really it was the soil that never got cleared. That soil is your attitude. It's your posture. And until you tend to it daily, deliberately, you'll live in the painful cycle of striving with nothing to show for it. And that's why this matters so much. You were never meant to live in constant pressure. You were never designed to chase for years and still feel empty. You were created to steward, to grow, to expand from a place of peace, not panic. to rise from inner strength, not public reaction. But you can only rise when what's happening inside of you agrees with what you say you want to build. That's spiritual maturity. That's personal integrity. That's alignment. Let me offer you a vision. Imagine the kind of future that unfolds when your attitude is trained, when your thoughts serve your goals, when your emotions are disciplined, when your words are chosen, when your presence is anchored. That's a future that doesn't need to be shouted into existence. It emerges slowly, silently, powerfully, and it lasts. Not because life got easier, but because you got aligned. So if you've been pushing but not progressing, pause, realign. If you've been loud but unheard, reflect, realign. If you've been chasing but resenting, breathe, realign. Because the future you want isn't waiting on more hustle. It's waiting on a new frame. And that frame starts with the one holding the tools. It starts with you. Every day begins the same way. Before the noise, before the tasks, before the world gets a hold of you, there's that quiet window where the first thoughts are formed. And in that moment, your attitude isn't just born, it's chosen. You either default into yesterday's frustration or you decide to enter the day with fresh perspective. And that's where the first discipline comes in. The morning truth check. It's simple, it's quiet, it's unglamorous, but it's vital. Because how you begin determines what you build. And if your first thoughts are left unchecked, don't be surprised if your life follows suit, drifting into reaction instead of rising with direction. You see, most people wake up into emotion. They reach for the phone, see the headlines, scroll through someone else's wins, absorb someone else's drama, and immediately they're out of sync. They haven't even taken a breath, and already their mind is full of complaint. Their attitude has been hijacked before the day even begins. But the builder, the person committed to growth, starts the morning with clarity, with alignment, with a pause to ask two essential questions: what is true today, and what can I do about it? Those two questions bring everything into order. What is true forces you out of emotion and into foundation. You remind yourself of what's real, that you're alive, that you've been given another day, that you still have agency, that you're still building. You reject the lie that says it's too late or it's too hard or nothing works. And instead, you declare, no, I still have tools, I still have time, I still have choices. And that mindset, when adopted every single morning, starts to rewire how you walk through the entire day. Then comes the second question: what can I do about it? And this is where maturity meets movement, because it reminds you that your emotions don't own the outcome. You do. That no matter how much is outside your control, there's always something within your reach. One decision, one action, one correction, one forward step. And when you ask that every morning, you train your brain not to collapse under emotion, but to rise into discipline. You stop waiting for the mood to feel right and start moving because it's the right thing to do. This truth check isn't about ignoring feelings. It's about placing them in the proper hierarchy. Feelings follow focus. And when you begin your day focused on what's true and what's possible, your attitude starts to carry weight. Not the fragile weight of hype or hope, but the steady, grounded strength of responsibility. And that kind of attitude doesn't just change your morning, it reshapes your capacity for the rest of your life. So here's the practice. Before you grab the phone, before you start reacting, sit, think, write, ask, what's true today? Remind yourself, I have breath, I have direction, I have work, I have value. And then, what can I do about it? List the priorities, anchor the actions, set the tone. Because the tone of your morning often becomes the texture of your life. And once you claim it, once you take command of that inner conversation, you don't just carry a better mood, you carry a better mentality. And that mentality is what builds the dream. Discipline doesn't begin with what you do, it begins with what you declare. So declare truth, declare intention, declare ownership, and let that quiet practice of the morning become the foundation for everything you create thereafter. If the morning truth check is the reset button, then this next discipline is the maintenance routine, the work of staying aligned throughout the day. I call it the inner dialogue audit. Because here's what I've learned. Most people don't lose momentum because of what happens around them. They lose it because of what happens inside them. The most damaging conversations are the ones no one else hears. The stories we rehearse, the labels we adopt, the scripts we run on autopilot. I'm not good at that. This always happens to me. Why try? These are not random thoughts. They are patterns. And if you don't confront them, They will become your operating system. They'll guide your decisions, limit your reach, and silently kill your dream before it ever has the chance to grow. Think of your mind like the engine of a car. You wouldn't expect that engine to run well without regular maintenance, right? You check the oil, you change the filter, you listen for strange sounds. That's what the inner dialogue audit does. It's the discipline of checking under the hood of your thinking every day, several times a day, not to be obsessive, but to stay aware, because thoughts become words, words become actions, and actions build the structure of your life. And if your thoughts are misaligned, if the engine is clogged with bitterness, fear, comparison, or complaint, no matter how hard you press the pedal, you're not going anywhere fast. Now, let me be clear. Thoughts will come. Negative ones, doubtful ones, even toxic ones. That doesn't make you broken. That makes you human. But discipline means you don't let those thoughts stay parked in your mind without question. You audit them. You inspect them. You ask, is this thought aligned with where I'm going? Is this belief helping me or hurting me? Did I choose this thought, or did I inherit it from someone else's fear? You ask those questions not once, but daily, hourly, moment by moment if you must, because this is how you take back control of your frame. The best builders know this. You cannot afford to leave your thinking on autopilot. That's how drift begins. That's how bitterness builds. That's how you start reacting instead of leading. And when your inner dialogue goes unchecked, you'll find yourself sabotaging good opportunities with old narratives. You'll find yourself playing small, not because of what's true, but because of what you let stay unchallenged inside your head. So what's the practice? It's simple, but powerful. Throughout the day, pause and ask, what am I rehearsing right now? And if the answer is fear, anger, shame, or scarcity, you replace it. You speak something better. You interrupt the script. You inject a new sentence. You correct the lie with truth, not with empty affirmations, but with grounded reminders. I can grow. This is a moment, not a life sentence. I respond with clarity, not chaos. I'm still building. That's the oil change. That's the tune-up. That's how you keep your internal world from decaying while your external world is still developing. Remember, discipline in attitude doesn't happen by accident. It happens by audit, daily inspection, constant awareness, willingness to call out the thought that doesn't serve the vision. And every time you do that, every time you clean up your internal language, you reclaim a little more power. You become a little more aligned, and the life you're building becomes that much more stable. So from this day forward, don't just check your schedule, check your speech. Don't just check your goals, check your inner voice. Because the most important leadership role you'll ever take is leading yourself from the inside out. Let me share with you one of the most underestimated disciplines in all of personal development: repetition. Not as a task, not as a strategy, but as a ritual. Because repetition isn't just about remembering, it's about rewiring. And your attitude, your daily posture, your emotional alignment, your mental resilience is shaped less by what you know and more by what you repeat. In fact, the most successful people I've ever met weren't the smartest in the room. They were simply the most intentional about what they told themselves, over and over again. They understood that in a world of chaos, a world of noise, a world that constantly tries to shape you, the only way to stay aligned is to repeat truth until it becomes instinct. Now let me tell you what the average person does. They hear a good principle once. They nod, they agree, they post a quote, and then they move on. They consume, but they don't install. And as a result, their life feels inconsistent, not because they don't have access to the right ideas, but because those ideas haven't been rehearsed enough to take root. But the builder, the person committed to discipline, understands that what gets repeated gets reinforced. And what gets reinforced becomes a part of who you are. So what is the repetition ritual? It's the deliberate daily practice of feeding your mind the same empowering truths until they stop sounding like motivation and start sounding like identity. It's finding the short, grounded, aligned phrases that speak to your direction and your values, and speaking them until they reshape your attitude. Things like, I respond, I adjust, I believe, I build, not just said once, but daily. I take ownership, I carry discipline, I walk in clarity. These aren't mantras for hype. They are anchors for alignment. They are the verbal construction tools that frame your thinking and direct your energy. This is where repetition moves from something helpful to something sacred. It's not just for the morning. It's for the middle of the day when things fall apart. It's for the late afternoon when doubt creeps in. It's for the long, quiet seasons when progress is invisible. That's when you reach back into your repetition ritual and remind yourself who you are and what you're doing. Because in the absence of repetition, drift takes over. You revert to old patterns. You let emotion hijack your focus. You forget the vision. You lose the tone. But when repetition is built into your rhythm, the dream stays close, even when the results feel far. Here's what I recommend. Pick 3 to 5 declarations that reflect your deepest disciplines. Write them, post them, read them, speak them daily, before meetings, after failures, in moments of success, to stay grounded, in moments of struggle, to stay strong. And never underestimate the power of rehearsal, because even professional performers rehearse what they already know, not to learn it, but to embody it. And your life is no different. If you want to carry a powerful attitude, you don't just think differently, you speak differently, again and again and again. Let me remind you, repetition is not childish. It's champion behavior. It's what makes professionals professional. It's what transforms principles from posters on the wall into habits in the soul. And if you're serious about becoming someone who doesn't just dream, but actually builds the dream, then you must be willing to say the same things until they become true of you. So say it with me now. I respond. I adjust. I believe. I build again, 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 not to feel good, but to stay aligned. Because alignment doesn't come from inspiration. It comes from repetition. Now we arrive at one of the most defining disciplines of maturity and one of the clearest signs of whether you're drifting or building. It's the discipline of emotional ownership. This is the line in the sand between those who live life as responders and those who live life as reactors. Because your emotions, when left undisciplined, will sabotage every good intention you set. They will distort your thinking, warp your perception, and cloud your attitude until the day feels heavier than it actually is. But emotional ownership changes everything. It says, that feeling, that tone, that frustration, it's mine. I may not have chosen the moment, but I choose how I carry it. And let me be clear, this is not about suppressing emotion. This is not about pretending everything's fine. It's about governing your emotional state with wisdom. Because if your emotions run the show, your life becomes reactive. You'll say things you regret. You'll abandon principles for temporary comfort. You'll let mood dictate momentum. And over time, that pattern will erode your self-respect. Because deep down, you know you were built for more than emotional whiplash. You know you were meant to lead yourself, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Think of emotional ownership like tending a fire. If left untended, it either dies down completely or grows wild and destructive. But with care, attention, boundaries, timing, it becomes warmth, light, power. The same is true of your emotional life. Anger, fear, discouragement, stress, these are not your enemies. They're signals. But if you mistake signals for commands, you'll obey your emotions instead of understanding them. And builders, those who construct their dream life on a foundation of principle, don't obey emotion. They direct it. So how does this play out practically? It starts with naming the emotion instead of becoming it. I feel angry is different than I am angry. I'm experiencing discouragement is different than I am discouraged. That small gap, that space between the emotion and your identity, is where ownership begins. It's where you regain authority over your tone, your posture, your next step. Because once you recognize the feeling, you can ask, what's it here for? What's it pointing to? And how do I lead through it? That's emotional leadership. That's maturity in motion. And let me offer you this. You do not need the world to stop frustrating you for you to carry peace. You don't need your schedule to ease up before you regain patience. You don't need every relationship to be perfect before you walk in joy. Because emotional ownership doesn't wait for the weather to change. It carries its own climate. It says, this moment doesn't control me. I govern it. That mindset doesn't come from hype. It comes from daily discipline, from choosing again and again to own what you feel without letting it own you. You've probably heard it said, he made me angry. She stressed me out. They ruined my day. But none of those things are true. Not if you're operating from principle. Because no one can insert emotion into you without your permission. The most powerful thing you can say is, I'm feeling this, and I'm still in charge. Not of the world, but of yourself. And the more you practice that, the more unshakable your attitude becomes. The less you're thrown off course, the quicker you recover, the deeper your presence, the the more trustworthy your leadership. So here's the charge. Don't outsource your frustration. Don't blame your fatigue on other people's expectations. Don't let emotions be an excuse to avoid growth. Own them, lead them, discipline them. Let them inform you, not define you. Because when your emotions no longer own you, your future suddenly becomes buildable. Your relationships become healthier. Your focus becomes sharper. And your attitude, it becomes a fortress, not made of denial, but of decision. From this day forward, declare it daily. My emotions are not in charge. I am. And when that truth becomes habit, your dream life becomes possible, not just in theory, but in reality. Everything you see is filtered through something. Your mind doesn't absorb the world raw. It frames it, it interprets it, it assigns meaning. And the lens you use, whether broken or whole, bitter or hopeful, reactive or grounded, determines how you experience life. That's why this final mental discipline is so powerful. Choosing the builder's lens. Because until you train your eyes to see through the lens of responsibility, opportunity, and alignment, you will interpret life as a burden instead of a blueprint. You will see obstacles instead of openings. You'll see stress instead of assignment. And eventually, you'll begin building a life you resent instead of a life you respect. So what is the builder's lens? It's a disciplined way of seeing. It's the trained ability to look at challenge and see material, to look at pressure and see preparation, to look at discomfort and see development. The builder doesn't say, "Why is this happening to me?" The builder says, "What is this shaping in me?" The builder doesn't look at difficulty and assume denial. He looks at it and assumes design. Because when you're building something meaningful, you expect resistance. You don't resent it, you respect it. Because you know the weight isn't trying to crush you, it's trying to carve you. The builder's lens also sees bricks instead of burdens. Most people go through life seeing everything as a weight. Every task, every delay, every interruption. They sigh, they complain, they offload responsibility. But the builder sees those same moments and says, "This is a brick. I can use this. This challenge is shaping my endurance. This correction is refining my character. This difficult season is solidifying my purpose." The attitude doesn't come from denial. It comes from discipline. Because when you train yourself to look through the builder's lens, you don't need easier conditions. You just need a better framework. Let's get practical. Every time something happens today, big or small, ask yourself, how would a builder see this? When someone criticizes you, instead of reacting, ask, where's the brick here? Is there something in that pain I can use to strengthen my foundation? When you feel behind, ask, am I measuring by emotion or by progress? What truth can I re-anchor in? When you hit a delay, ask, is this a denial or is this a deeper preparation? These questions are not soft, they're strong. They break emotional reaction and reintroduce principle. They turn chaos into clarity. They keep your internal posture rooted in possibility. And make no mistake, this lens is a choice. You don't inherit it, you install it. One decision, one thought, one reframed moment at a time. It's not always easy. Sometimes you'll want to put the old lens back on, the one that sees everything through the filter of why me. But the more you practice the builder's lens, the more natural it becomes. Eventually, you start walking into situations with strength, not because they're easier, but because your interpretation has been trained. Let me tell you something I've said for years. Life and business are like the changing seasons. You can't change the seasons, but you can change yourself. And one of the fastest ways to change yourself is to change the way you see. Because when you see rightly, you act rightly. When you act rightly, you build wisely. And when you build wisely, everything changes. So from this moment forward, commit to this practice. Wake up and put on the builder's lens. Look for the bricks. Look for the blueprint. Look for the assignment in every adversity. Because you are not a victim of life. You are a constructor of it. And your greatest power is not in your speed. It's in your sight. And that sight, when aligned, becomes the very foundation your dream will stand on. Let's end where transformation truly begins. Not with another plan, not with another push, not with louder noise or more effort, but with the single shift that changes everything, a new attitude. Because the truth is, your life, the one you dream of, the one that's waiting just on the other side of alignment, isn't delayed by talent, luck, or opportunity. It's waiting on your posture. It's waiting on the tone you bring to your days, the words you speak to yourself when no one's listening, the way you frame what's hard, what's slow, what's stretching you. And until that frame is rebuilt, all your striving will continue to feel like spinning. But when that frame changes, when your attitude matures, strengthens, deepens, everything in your life begins to respond. See, attitude isn't decoration, it's architecture. Every thought, every tone, every quiet response to adversity, that's a brick. And over time, those bricks build something. They build a perspective. They build a presence. They build a foundation that either supports the weight of your dream or collapses under it. And most people aren't failing because their dreams are too big. They're failing because their frame is too weak. Their emotional posture can't support their purpose. Their inner dialogue doesn't match their external ambition. They keep reaching for more without first becoming more, and that's where the break begins. But that doesn't have to be your story. That doesn't have to be how your future unfolds, because the greatest gift of all is this: you can change your attitude today. You don't need a title. You don't need a degree. You don't need anyone's permission. You can decide right now to stop carrying life like a burden and start treating it like a blueprint. You can wake up tomorrow with a builder's lens, with emotional ownership, with practiced repetition, with a morning of clarity, with a mind that has been trained to see possibility instead of poison. And when you do, you'll feel it. Not in hype, but in heaviness lifted, in peace returned, in focus regained, in progress earned. So, here's my final challenge to you. Don't lose the dream over a casual tone. Don't let sarcasm rob you of sincerity. Don't let blame steal your clarity. Don't let a poor internal posture disqualify you from a future that's been waiting on you to simply grow into it. Step back into responsibility, not because it's easy, but because it's yours. Own your voice, own your words, own your emotional tone, because the discipline you build inside will always outlast the chaos outside. Imagine your life 5 years from now, not louder, not busier, but better, steadier, clearer, built from the inside out by a man or woman who no longer blames, no longer drifts, no longer waits to feel perfect before doing what's principled. Imagine the people around you feeling the shift in your presence. Imagine walking into the room not with pressure, but with peace, not with performance, but with posture. That's the fruit of disciplined attitude. That's the legacy of alignment. And it starts today, not with motivation, but with decision, with a new tone, a new filter, a new lens, one that sees construction instead of chaos, one that speaks truth instead of reaction, one that says, I no longer rehearse the problem. I respond as a builder. So take this to heart. Your dream life doesn't need more force. It needs a new frame, and you control it. You shape it, you steward it, you build it. From this day forward, let the way you carry your life reflect the future you're committed to creating.